Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're at chapter 5, verse 12. We began discussing yesterday the idea of the sota, the woman who was suspected of being unfaithful to her husband. I wanted to see at least part of a Kli Yakar on Pasuk Yud Beis. Now, I just want to warn you, at the beginning of it, it's going to sound very like, we don't normally learn things like this, but he's going to come around to a spot which I think is something that people ask about a lot. And so I think the first part is interesting. I wouldn't have seen this together for the first part, but the second part is I think, a very relevant point. Now, if you remember, the last topic that we discussed in the Parsha, that the Parsha was discussing before the story of the Sota, was this person who, actually we didn't discuss this part, person who's not diligent in giving truma, in giving the different gifts to the Kohen and the like. That was the last section before the discussion of Sota. Kli Yakar Pasuk Yud Beis. Ish ki sisteh ishto. Smichos Parsha Zu L'Pasuk HaKodem. You know, whenever there's something that's not chronological, which of course God could have conveyed these laws to Moshe in any kind of order, you always have to ask yourself, what do you learn from the juxtaposition? Now, many times, there's not an obvious lesson in the juxtaposition, but many, many times in the Farshim, and generally every juxtaposition has some commentator somewhere who has something to, learn from the juxtaposition. So he says, the reason why there's this juxtaposition between the discussion of Sota and the discussion of a person who doesn't give the truma appropriately. Pirish Rashi brings down, Im atom ma'akev matnos hakohen chayecha shetitzarich lavoi lav lahavi loas hasota. If you hold back from giving the appropriate gifts to the Kohen, God's going to bring you to the Kohen in another way. You're going to have these issues of whether the suspicions of a lack of fidelity are correct or incorrect. It's a terrible experience to be going through. The whole scenario is a terrible experience. So if you don't meet the Kohen to give him the truma, God's going to bring you to the Kohen for this reason, through Sota, because the husband brings his wife to the Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, fine. Perish leperusha. The Kli Yakar says, you know what that means? There's an idea that if a person doesn't give the appropriate agricultural gifts like Truma and Maser and the like, they'll become impoverished because they're not listening to God's rules of what they're supposed to do with their income, so God won't bless them with the same kind of income. Statement number 1. Statement number 2. The Gemara says that if a man has relations with a harlot, the day will come where he has financial need. Okay, fine. Shenemar Kitzitzitza Pasuk. So the Kli Yakar says as follows: Isha roa shabala bali de oni he choshadato shabali de oni machmas shayiroa zonos. So in a home, obviously we never know why things are happening, but we have lessons. This could happen for this reason, that could happen for that reason, not necessarily, but it could. So a woman's sitting there at home, and all of a sudden, the man is not succeeding in his finances as he once was. So she sits there and she says, maybe it's because he's being unfaithful to me. And the lesson from the Gemara is that could be a reason that the person's finances cannot go well. So she says to herself, gosh, if he's not being faithful with me, why should I be faithful with him? Now, little does she know that he is getting punished for something. Again, not necessarily, but it could be he's getting punished for something, but not that he wasn't faithful to her, but because he wasn't giving truma to the Kohen. But the fact that he's having these financial difficulties brings her to wonder if he's being unfaithful to her. And then so that motivates her to be unfaithful to him. Okay. So skipping a line or two, and this whole mess is because this person didn't give the truma to the Kohen. Now, ultimately, she begins a relationship with someone else. The husband becomes suspicious of her. She says, I was meeting privately with the person. It wasn't appropriate, but I never was with the person sexually. The husband says, well, we're going to go to the Beis HaMikdash and you're going to drink the Sota waters. Kirazal Amru V'nikah Ha'ish Me'avon. At the end of the story with the Sota waters, it says, the man, the husband, is cleansed of sin. What does that mean? The Gemara says, Im humunuka me'avon, hamayim bod kinosa. The waters only work in this situation if the man is an innocent person. V'haino me'avon ze adom l'avon shalosh. Im hunaki mimasha chashto so ishto, az dinu shivteku hamayim. Avalim eino menuka me'avon ze v'chashat shalo emes. People ask about this all the time. Why is this only on the wife? Now, there's a very technical reason why this is only on the wife. This is where I say I don't make the rules, I just report them, okay? On a Torah level, the man is allowed to be married to more than one wife, okay? On a Torah level, the wife is not allowed to be married to more than one man. Okay, so this is a very fundamental breach of the Torah's image of marriage. But that notwithstanding, the drasha that the Kli Yakar is citing here is saying that if the man is being unfaithful to his wife, he's not going to get brought in to drink from the Sota waters. That's not going to happen. But the Sota waters won't test his wife's fidelity to him. Sota waters won't work. It won't mean anything because God only applies the Sota waters if the man is being faithful in his relationship with the woman. So I just think that that's an interesting thing to think about a little bit. Okay. Moving on. Verse 18. So the husband brings his wife to the Beis HaMikdash. The Kohen presents the woman before God in Beis HaMikdash. Ufaras ros hoisha berasan al kapeis minchas zikaron minchas hakohen minchas knaosi, excuse me, and the Kohen the wife's hair is uncovered, and the Kohen places an offering on her hands. Uviyara Kohen yu me hamarim hamaorim, and the Kohen will hold the bitter cursing waters, and this is the water that she's going to drink from. And the amazing thing of the Sota waters, there's a parchment with God's name on it that's placed inside the water, and it gives it this miraculous property that if she's been unfaithful, she'll die a painful death. And if she has not been unfaithful, she'll be blessed. When did the water become bitter? The Torah describes the water as bitter. Why is the water bitter? So, somewhat technical, but I thought this was interesting. Ramban on Pasuk Yud Ches, Uviyara Kohen yiyu me'amarim ha'ma'orim. Amru ha'mefarshim. Various commentators say, Ki ha'kasov korei osam al shem sofam. When the pasuk refers to them as bitter waters, it doesn't mean they are bitter. It means they will lead to bitterness. Ki yomer la Hashem ma'od v'yaru osa. Because if she's been unfaithful, these waters are going to be very bitter for her. Not necessarily how they taste, but because of what result they bring about for her. The waters are called bitter because of what's going to happen down the road. Because they'll bring bitterness to the body and they'll arouse sin. The Gemara actually says something else. The Gemara says the Kohen puts a bitter ingredient in the water. And that's to make a point to her. You know, when she's drinking from the water, you know, that this whole experience is such a bitter, unpleasant experience. That even if she's innocent about sexual relations, she did sort of have a hand in all this by going into seclusion with another man. Okay. But he says, Vim King Shamar Vova Amayim Hamarim Lamarim, Hayaroi Shiomer Vova Amayim Hamarim Lamarim. The Ramban says it's a little bit difficult to understand the pasuk that way because the pasuk should describe the water as bitter. It shouldn't describe the water as cursing bitter waters. Okay. The Ramban says, I think the pshat is that when the woman drinks the water at the beginning, tastes like regular water. The Acharei, you know, the Ramban, I just want to say, he didn't want to mention a specific brand of water because you don't know how people are going to react. But okay. The Acharei Boam Bikirba Im Nitma'a Ye'orosa, v'targish miyad ha'mariros b'fio v'kirba. If she has been unfaithful, once she drinks the water, all of a sudden, there will be a bitter taste in her mouth. In other words, when she first drinks it, it'll taste normal. But then if she's unfaithful, the water will be bitter. This is an interesting discussion. So we have three possibilities. One possibility is the water tastes totally normal. And what it means by bitter is it's going to bring her a bitter experience, possibly. The next shot is, no. He put something in it to kind of get her attention. There was a bitter ingredient in it, tasted bitter. Third shot is part of the experience if she's unfaithful is all of a sudden she gets this bitter taste in her mouth. Okay, interesting. Let's go on now to the Ramban on Pasuk Chaf. The Ramban on Pasuk Chaf, this is sort of a general statement about the whole concept of Sota. We won't start at the beginning of the Ramban. We'll start about 8 lines in, beginning with the words V'hinei ein. V'hinei ein b'chol mishpatei HaTorah davar tolui b'neis silasio inyan hazeh. In all of the rules of the Torah, all of its laws, there's nothing dependent on a miracle, like the story of Sota is, like the halacha of Sota is. Shehu pele, it's a wondrous thing. V'neis kavua sheyasa b'Yisrael b'yosam rubam osam ritzon shel makom. It was an awesome miracle that would occur, that these waters would define whether she had been with someone or not. Amazing. Now, first of all, the Ramban says in passing that it doesn't always work. We mentioned earlier a time where it wouldn't work if the husband didn't deserve for it to work. But even if the husband as an individual deserves for it to work, it only works if the majority of the Jewish people are observing Hashem's mitzvos. In other words, it's sort of similar to what we discussed with Saras, if you remember before, that for God to sort of bring this revelation, it has to be that the people are on a level worthy of it. So too, this remarkable miracle can only come if the people as a nation are deserving. But the Ramban says it happens. Ki chafetz l'man sidko liyasir hanoshim shlo tasena kazimas yasir amin. Ulenakas Yisrael min aram zerashi ru'uyim lahasros shchinaso b'socham. So he says that the effect of these Sota waters is it creates a tremendous deterrent for a person to be unfaithful in marriage. And it means that the lineage of Klal Yisrael hopefully will be free of children born from illicit and immoral relationships. So he says, because the sanctity of the relationship between a woman and a man and the sanctity of the lineage of Klal Yisrael is so important, God brings about this remarkable miracle to help this along. But once the Jewish people got bogged down by sin, this whole capacity stopped because the Jewish people didn't deserve that divine intervention anymore. So we discussed the Kli Yakar regarding a scenario that Sota waters would not work. We discussed the Ramban regarding why the waters are referred to as bitter. And we discussed this broader statement from the Ramban regarding why and when the Sota waters would work.